Hi, and welcome to Whole Heart Transformation. I am Melissa Alguera, your personal identity life coach. Let's go to the podcast. Hi, guys. Welcome to Whole Heart Transformation. So today I want to talk to you in detail about understanding parts of you. So different parts of you that want different things. You know, it's like that feeling of the internal struggle, that internal wrestling that we deal with. One part of us wants to do one thing and another part of us wants to do another thing. And then we find ourselves in this conflict, in this combative place. And I think it's really important to understand this from a non-clinical way, because when people try to explain it clinically, we really don't understand it. But when we can understand it from a real life experiential way where we're like, man, like I relate to that. Like I understand there's a part of me that wants to eat that cookie. And there's a part of me that's like, I want to be fit. Or there's this part of me that wants to face pain, but then there's a part of me that's like, I don't want to face any of that. And really understanding how this impacts our life, how it rules our life, the parts of us that we may not like, and why those parts are ruling us the way that they are. It's so important to understand what's happening in us. And so I want to start from a place of kind of understanding self-reflection and why we get to a place where we cannot face reality. We cannot sit with difficult emotions. We cannot cope with life's reality, and some of that understanding of why we end up having parts of us the way that we do. So first I want to say, if you do not understand what self-reflection is, let me give you a little bit of understanding. So self-reflection is the ability to look at ourselves and go, with curiosity, not condemnation or not shame, and say, I wonder why I'm doing this, or I wonder why I'm thinking this way, or I wonder why I move towards this. So self-reflection is the ability to look at self with a compassionate and curious way of being, instead of going towards shame. So shame is like it hides, in a sense, it hides us from being able to self-reflect. So we have to do something else. We can't self-reflect when our internal system just moves towards shame. So there's that first. So self reflection, I personally believe this. I was not taught this, but I believe this based on working with hundreds of clients and doing my own work and understanding my own upbringing and how attachment works. Is self reflection, I believe, comes from having a parent attuned to us with curiosity. So attunement is someone else like aligning, or like in the same tune as us emotionally. So, for example, when I see my son and he starts to quiver that lip, and I say, oh, like you look sad, and allowing him to then express that emotion, because I'm attuning to the sadness that I'm seeing in him. I'm a witness to it. And so I'm aligning myself with what's happening in him emotionally. Not that I'm taking on his emotion, but I'm allowing him, I'm seeing it, I'm noticing it, I'm calling it out, and I'm witnessing it. And I'm holding the space for him to express the sadness, or to express the anger, or whatever emotion that is coming up for my child. So I believe that self reflection is a gift we receive from a parent attuning to our emotional experience and also coming with curiosity. So it's like I'm seeing my son sad, and I say, oh, you look sad. You're sad? And they go, mm-hmm. And then I say, oh, like tell me about that. What is the sadness about? And I'm actually sticking with the experience that he's having, instead of trying to deflect or get him to stop or say, you're okay, and make it better, but allowing him to be okay with his emotional experience. And I'm coming with attunement and curiosity. So that leads us then, when we grow up, to be able to attune to ourselves, to go, I wonder what's happening inside of me. What emotion am I feeling right now? And allowing ourselves to sit with what is actually happening inside of us. Okay, so now on to parts to understand this aspect of ourselves. So parts happen for a couple of different reasons. I actually think that we might be wired with this. I'm not fully sure of this. I don't think scientists or even like biblically speaking, if you're a Christian or you follow the Bible or any other religious belief, I don't know if we are initially wired with parts of us um as human beings. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. So I don't know. But the way that I understand parts of us is in the unhealthy aspect of how parts show up. So, and I guess probably we do have like, both parts where maybe we did come with parts of us. Because you think about the part of us that wants to do something and part of us that doesn't, and those aren't necessarily good or bad experiences. Like for example, I want to sleep longer, but also I want to get up and go work out. That doesn't mean either one of those parts are bad. One just wants to rest, one wants to work out. So there is that internal conflict, not necessarily out of trauma, but a lot of the parts work that I do and a lot of the parts work that I encounter with my clients is where they did have trauma. And it's like this part of them is no longer connected to the core. So either, let's say, let's give an example of some of the clients that I've worked with. One client where they really and then I just want to say this before I go into the details of this, but like we all have a inherent need to be wanted, to be loved, to be noticed, to be cared for, to be chosen. So these are our inherent needs as the human race. We are born into relationship. So if we have a parent who is not helpful in that, who has their own issues that they're not dealing with, okay? And then they have children, and the children's emotions or the children's experiences is too much because the parent is disconnected from their own pain and trauma, then that child most likely will have some sort of inability to express emotion or get their needs met because the parent is emotionally deficient, is characterologically deficient. And when I say characterologically, I'm talking about the four definitions of character, which is attachment, integration, separation, and adulthood. I said that backwards. It should be attachment, separation, integration, and adulthood. Excuse me. So, and I was thinking about, the actual definition by Dr. John Townsend, which you guys, if you've listened to me long enough, you know that we say that definition is the definition of character is the set of abilities to face and feel in reality. So me having the ability in my attachment to face and feel in reality, me in my character having the ability to have separation in my character with other people. Can I be separate? Can I hold boundaries? Can I not take on other people's emotions as my responsibility? Do I have internal boundaries? Integration, the ability to grieve and face reality. Can I sit with grief, or do I have to do something different in order to avoid grief? And then adulthood, our sexuality, how we show up in our work, how we show up and taking responsibility. All of these things are the definition of character, and we know where there's a deficiency in those four things: attachment, separation, integration, and adulthood. If in any of those areas we cannot face and feel in reality. So what am I trying to say with all this? What I'm trying to say is, if there is any sort of area in our life, starting with attachment, because right, we're born into relationship, then we cannot face and feel in reality. We have to do something different to be able to cope with what is happening to our body, to our brain, if our primary caretaker is not there to help us process and regulate our emotional experience. So, with that being said, with parts, the example I wanted to give of one of my clients was the so one of my clients, their parent is not emotionally mature in a lot of areas of their character, and they do a lot of deflecting, a lot of projecting, a lot of um, coping mechanisms that were really unhealthy. And this client of mine, who was a child at the time, needed their parent, needed the parent to choose them, to want them. And so, because the parent couldn't do that, didn't get the healing, didn't process their own trauma, it led the child to have to avoid wanting connection. And we see this a lot in avoid it. We call this avoidant attachment. It's like where my needs could not be met. So I had to do something else that, wasn't in my natural, in my nature, which nature would be connection. I have to do something else. I have to avoid trying to connect because now connection is not safe. I have to avoid expressing my emotion. So then we have coping strategies around this. So this client, the coping strategy as they got older was at a certain point in any sort of romantic relationships, when it got too serious, then they completely left the relationship. And that was because her internal response towards what happened with the parent led them to feel unsafe in connection. And so this is a part of her, right? This part of her that could not feel safe in connection now has to avoid connection. But then there's this other part, which I would say is the deeper core need that was there all along, wants connection, wants relationship, knows that's good, but cannot access it because this part has been so severed and so cut off from the core of how she should have been developed, from the core of who she is, from her own values. This part of her that says I value the part of her that does value relationship, that does value being in connection, this part over here that didn't get that need met was actually cut off and was not now no longer allowed to be back into connection because it was too overwhelming for her body. So when we're talking about parts and these two aspects of us, the part of us that is disconnected, it's so interesting. The part of us that's disconnected is often the part that's in the driver's seat. And this part of us will, as soon as there's a trigger, this part will activate. Like for what I was example of what I was saying was when it was getting too close, this part of this client, when it was getting too close in relationship, was getting too serious, and she would bail because it wasn't safe to connect. So we have to understand this, because if we don't, then we're going to look at the part of us that is doing the thing that we don't like and we don't want, and continue to what some therapists or psychologists have said is to exile that part. We deem it as bad. And when we deem it as bad, what we are actually doing a counterproductive thing. I call it like pushing like the red button. Like we say to people, don't touch that red button. We say to kids, don't touch that because that's going to be bad. And so when we are taking the part of us that is doing something that we don't like, and we are saying, get out of here, get in the back, it's like pushing a red button for that part. Now this part is going to do it, and it's going to be even bigger. It's going to be wilder. It's going to be more intense. And honestly, this is subconscious. This isn't coming from we're not thinking to ourselves, I'm going to do that bigger. Now, maybe some parts do, those really rebellious parts of us do that. But the majority of the time, it's a subconscious response. It's just something we're doing. It's automatic. And we know what is in our subconscious by our automatic responses when we are triggered. And I think it's really important to understand that when we are triggered and we do something, we can know internally that there is a part of us that's disconnected if that feels like we're doing that from a disconnected place. So how do we heal these parts of us? How do we integrate these parts of us? Well, it takes somatic work. It takes somebody who knows how to integrate those parts. It takes somebody who can help us reconnect in real time when it's felt. This is why I can do this as a coach, because I do this with my clients as it is felt. If you feel it, we can heal it. That's my motto. However, I cannot, if something, if we're using defense mechanisms, right, to block us from feeling that, then we can't access that part. And then that's like, okay, then that would be somebody who could maybe access that through therapeutically. But I generally don't find that people do. I generally find that if there's a part of us that is so disconnected, we might need to go do some brain spotting or maybe some EMDR to reveal that part of us and then take it with someone like me to actually process it and integrate that part of us. So, and here's another thing. So, think about it from the perspective of the example I just gave you about this client of mine who longed for connection with this parent, and this parent just couldn't do that. And so then that part of them had to detach, avoid, go into like disconnection relationally. How can we look at that part and say, you are bad? You are all bad. How could you? Like, it's a young part of them. And many people do not understand that parts of them are very young because they are looking at it from the behaviors that they're doing as adults. But if you trace it back in the felt sense of the body, right here, right now, I can say to a client, how long has this been with you? We're not going into the past. We're going from a felt experience right now. How long does this feel like it's been with you? Oh gosh, it's been with me since I was 5, 4, or 3, whatever. Then we can access that part of them right here, right now, and move in towards grace and compassion and understanding, and then undo the aloneness of that and help that part to face the reality, help that part to face grief, help that part to move towards acceptance instead of continuing to push them in the dark. And then it keeps pressing that red button to be seen and known. And you know what? I always say I appreciate the parts of us that are acting out in a way because that part is so desperate to reconnect, to reintegrate. So if we can look at these parts of us with compassion, with care, with understanding that, man, like this part of us is just doing whatever it had to do in order to survive. You think about it, like if a parent wasn't helping this part of you that was needing love and compassion, it wasn't getting that. You weren't getting that. What other choices can a child make that's good for themselves? What other choices can a child determine what's right? We don't, as kids, we don't have the brain capacity. It's why some of the things that we're allowing children to make decisions for themselves right now is ridiculous because they don't have the internal resources to make life altering, life changing decisions. And we know this because many people who have been addicts, they started young, especially with porn addiction. They started really young and they started making these choices to keep going back to that and grabbing at that like a little raccoon going after a little diamond and just keep pulling at it. And it's like killing their arm and their arm is getting chopped off by whatever trap is there, right? Like this is, children don't have the capacity to be able to determine, oh, that's mom and dad's problem. Like that's dad's issue. That's mom's issue. No, they don't have the internal resilience, internal capacity to make that decision unless a parent tells them anything different. So, parents that are not healed, I just need you to know that you, as an unhealed parent, are affecting your children. And they might have parts of them that are alone because they didn't get the resources from you that they needed. We internalize our parents. If we don't have the parents that we can internalize in a good way, we will have to disconnect from our parent. And so then that leaves us with parts of us that are disconnected from the very core of who we were meant to be. And the beautiful and great news today is that you can reconnect those parts. I have personally done that. I think I had integrated one of the parts of me, it was like between like 11 and 13, a part of me that I missed. I didn't even realize I'd missed this part of me. And once I started to process it and reconnect it, I was like, this part of me. I can't believe that I've been living without this part and I've been pushing it into the background because of the way that it acted out from trauma. I all the good things about it I needed and I wasn't able to have because I didn't have the space to reconnect it and see that it was good. I didn't have any witnesses to attune to that part and say, wow, like, of course you would do this. Of course. And of course, this part's beautiful. And of course, the behavior that it's doing, it makes sense that it's doing that. And we can, we can validate the reality of the fact that while this was a great tool and strategy with what you had at that time, but it doesn't serve you anymore. So I hope this has given you some insight to parts work and why it's so important that we do not shame the parts of us that act out in ways that we don't like, because number one, the red button effect. I always say this is my term. If you tell somebody not to do something that has a part of them that's like this and you push it into the dark, you're going to find that red button. It's just going to go back and push it harder. And to have compassion, so that way that part can be known, have the aloneness undone, and integrate that part so that they can be reconnected to the core, and we can no longer have to go back to these behaviors and strategies and coping skills that we did when we were emotionally deficient and we had no one to be there to support us. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Thanks for listening.
If you have found today's podcast helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. If you are interested in coaching with me, go to www.identitylife.coach. And you can also find me on Instagram, identity.life.coach.